or previously in your life that you have either learned to like over time or that you have grown to hate over time that has changed? For me, growing up, I thought shrimp were the weirdest thing that God had ever created, and I hated the idea of it, the smell of it, the taste of it. But now I can eat popcorn shrimp. Like, it was the one food I ever had. I could eat it forever. Same with tomatoes. I thought they were just a gross, wet, round ball. I've always wanted to get the tomato fight. It's a different story. But is there like maybe a music genre or a fashion sense or a style that you like used to love and now you're like, who was I back then? Why has this changed so much? Is there anybody who's had that sort of experience with food or anything? Hold on. But you get to. You don't have to share, just kidding. Riley?
I used to hate mashed potatoes, but I like them now.
You used to hate mashed potatoes? When you know how good mashed potatoes can be, you're like, okay, I'm gonna be good.
Gravy on it.
Oh, gravy. Don't get me started on that. Or grits. Funny?
I hate like all fish, but I like sushi.
Okay, sushi. You can start with sushi. All right, sushi's good. Candle?
I used to hate ketchup but love tomatoes.
Okay.
I don't know why.
How do you
Real great for you. Whenever you get a chance, you say hate tomatoes. Noodles.
I used to hate seafood fish, and I still hate seafood fish.
So, you haven't changed today. Thank you for being totally relevant. The other noodles.
I used to hate sweet potatoes, but
Same. My Nemo, every Thanksgiving, she would make the sweet potatoes with the melted marshmallows on top. Grab that fork, scoop the marshmallows, leave everything else, and just go to town. I love sweet potatoes now. So, personal thing I'm going through. Burner?
I used to love corn and my grandma ruined it for me.
How?
She used to make her own corn.
That's not something you do. Unless you're a farmer.
They do live on a farm. Well, kind of. They have chickens.
I'm waiting for you to keep going. Alexa.
Used to hate coffee, and if you know me, you know I'm the biggest coffee addict.
Yes, that's a big one, Nate. Big one. Yes, right here. You used to like eggs, but now you don't? Okay, is it like, you don't like it when they're running? Got it. Eggs have that smell about them to where it's, I understand that. Alright, last one, us.
I used to love to read, and now I find it repulsive.
Read is terrible. I have a lot of hope for the future of this generation, okay? So check that out. No. One for me is I used to hate just the idea of country music. I was like, why are you wasting this musical sound with such annoying twang? Now I can appreciate it. A nice summer day, I was just chilling by the pool. It can hit right. And I'm learning to appreciate the love things I used to hate, but I'm also finding myself changing over time. And this isn't a trick question, but I want you to think reflectively right now. You can write it down or just think to yourself. What are a few things in your life that are a big part of your life, but you had zero say in it? For instance, the family you're born into, the city that you were born into, maybe how you look, maybe certain things like that, to where it's like you came to this world and that's almost like something you could just never really change. I want to call that I want to call that forced change. Change that is, it's something that happens to you, but you have genuinely no say in it. I want you to think about that. And on the opposite end, I want you to think of what are some things in your life that you actually do have the ability to choose. What do you have the ability to choose? Maybe what you watch, what you listen to, what you eat, whatever you do in your free time. I want to empower you to see that there are things that you have so much choice in. Does anybody have other examples of what you can on a daily basis choose to do, or how to go about things? Funny?
You can eat healthier.
You can, that option's always there, right? You can always eat healthier. Doesn't mean we have to. You can enjoy Krispy Kreme every now and then. You go sit for your hand raised?
Well, I had a similar answer, but I'm going to go different now. You can choose to be attractive if you really want to be. So, like, let's say if you're like a 2 out of 10. You start working out and you can help your 4 out of 10.
Okay.
While you're 6
Bit by bit.
Then, you get different hairstyles, you're 8 out of 10.
If there's one thing, if there's one thing from tonight, if you're watching online, if you're a 2 out of 10, And he knows he's taking applications to get you to a 4. Alright? Should I get a haircut? Start working out. Anybody else? No? Alright, Sarah, last one. Huh? Your friends. That's a massive one, because I think a lot of people may find themselves in social situations, but they may not recognize the power they have to choose to stay in those social situations. Now, this is my last rhetorical question. I want you to think about this. My last question, think about this. If there was one thing in your life, you may not have complete control over it, but if there was one thing that you did have complete control over that you could change, what would you change about your life? I want you to seriously think about that. If there was one thing that you could change, and you had the power to change it, what would you change? Genuinely think about that. The first message I gave last year when the pandemic hit, the first message I gave from home over video on my home button iPhone, and it was just like in my living room with a ring light feeling like this. It was very bizarre. It was about change and how we are in a season of forced change, how we can't control these things that are happening to us. We can't control the fact that our schedule, that our normalcy, that our routines are all changing and those same it. And my question, almost a year and a half later, is, have you changed on your own from your own decisions? Or have you just kind of gone with whatever's been happening? What's interesting is that you'll go through times in your life where things will force you to change that you can't control, like this past year, but one of the biggest reflections of your character is when you choose to change something for yourself. Now, tonight's message is going to be short, it's to the point, but it's challenging and reflective in the way that you see the power of what you choose to change in your life. There's a famous coach, he used to coach for UCLA basketball team, his name is John Wooden, right? Very well respected in terms of leadership, writing, a bunch of titles. He said this famous leadership quote, put on the screen. He said, failure is not fatal, but failure to change could be. Failure is not fatal, but failure to change could be. And what I'm getting at is that you may not be happy with certain parts of your dealt with in your life. You may not be happy with the family you have. You may not be happy with the way you feel about yourself. You may not be happy with a bunch of different things that may seem out of your control. And some of you have even gone to the point where you maybe have blamed God for situations that you found yourself in. And while blaming God may be the easy default, it may be what comes natural to you, or it may be a quick deflection of taking ownership of something in your life, God may actually be the one waiting for you to make the change out of it, because you do have the capability to do so. So tonight, I want you to focus on certain things in your life that you have the ability to change. Stop waiting in the background and hoping that God does something crazy, but realize the gifts and the talents that He's given you to make the change necessary for you to be the person He created you to be. Now, what I love is that we see this in the life of a guy in the Bible. His name is Saul. Originally, later on, he's changed to Paul. And for those of you who don't know, Saul was a Pharisee. He was someone who knew the law, knew the rules, knew the role to play, but he didn't even recognize Jesus at the time. Saul was someone who took advantage of authority, and he was actually an incredibly cruel human being. And in fact, there was a time when the government back then was intentionally seeking out Christians and killing them. There's a man named Stephen. He was falsely accused of something. He was brought before the court, and when they asked Stephen about, hey, did you do all these things, which weren't even true, all Stephen did was tell them how good God was and what He's done in the first family in the past. And in response, the Pharisees ended up stoning Stephen to death. And the person that was behind that, the script is Acts 8, 1 through 3, and Saul approved of their killing. Saul was a cruel man, and I'm going to read this to you. Saul approved of their killing of Stephen. And on that day, a great persecution broke out against the church of Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him. If you go to the next slide. Godly men buried Stephen, mourned deeply for him. But Saul began to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off both men and women and put them in prison. And again, I'm trying to get you this picture of who Saul was, because I bet when Saul was your age, I doubt he was like, I know what I want to do when I grow up. I'm going to be dragging in stone. Like, that's just, I doubt he ever intentionally said that this is what I'm going to do. But through small choices of relationships, habits, connections, maybe wanting to fit in, Saul slowly found himself in a cycle of change that led him to become this person who cared more about how people saw him than what God had created him for. And that's why I love Saul's story so much. I don't love him for who he was, but I love him for how he changed off of his own decision. One day when Saul was on his way to the city called Damascus, this happened. Look at the screen. I want you to imagine this, picture this. Verse 1, it says, "Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. Saul went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, aka any who believed in Jesus, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem." Next slide. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell onto the ground and he heard a voice saying to him out loud, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." Now, for the story of Saul, he was blinded for 3 days and he no longer had a choice. For the first time in his life, probably, he was completely helpless. He no longer had a choice. He no longer had control. He was completely helpless. I want to ask you, have you ever been in that sort of season to where it feels like whatever you do, whatever you try, however hard you pray, however many times you get anxious, and however nice you try to be, your life just doesn't change for the better at all? Like, have you experienced that, whether it's been during school, maybe this past year during COVID? Those times are really, really tough. And sometimes it feels like the only choice we have is to believe that either God's changed or that you have no hope at all. I know that's a real feeling that a lot of you have felt. But no matter what, and this is what I want to be almost like the groundwork of where we go from tonight, no matter what, the circumstance or the situation, you may not have control over certain things in your life, but you always have a choice of something. You genuinely have a choice of something. And rhetorically, I want to ask you, do you actually believe it? You may not be able to control the family you're born into, but you have a choice of who you are in that family. You may not be able to control a certain friendship or relationship, but you can have a choice of how you are to that person. You always have a choice. Saul was a man with a past, a reputation, and a routine. He made a choice 3 days after he was blind. I want you to look at the screen. This happened. After 3 days, it says something like scales fell from Saul's eyes, and he could finally, once again, see again. He got up, he was baptized immediately, and after taking some food, he regained his strength. Saul then spent several days with the disciples in Damascus, and at once he began to, don't go to the next slide. Don't go to the next slide. At once he began to, and I want you to put yourself in Saul's shoes. What would you do? After 3 days of you being helpless, 3 days of you being blind, 3 days of you not knowing where you were or who was helping you, would you choose to be pissed off at God for being blind for 3 days? Would you be thankful for finally being able to see? And I don't want this to be like a cheesy question. I want you to what would you do? What choice would you make? I want you to internally think, how do you process your ability with what it is you have the freedom to choose? If you go to the next slide, it says, at once, Saul, he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. All those who heard him were astonished and asked, wait, isn't this the man who raised havoc in Jerusalem among all those who called on Jesus' name? And hasn't he come here to take them as prisoners to the chief priests? Yet Saul grew more and more powerful and backed the Jews living in Damascus by proving that Jesus is the Messiah. I love the story is that Saul made a choice to change. He chose his change. Saul made a choice to trust, to believe, and to live in the complete opposite life that he had led before. To be completely honest and blunt with you all, we have no excuse. Every complaint that you and I give is a choice that we're not making to change. Why? Because complaining is so much easier. We get to point the other finger. It's in our DNA. It's just naturally what we do. We naturally complain. If we want something, we're so much quicker to blame God than to make a change. We're quicker to complain and point the finger then we are to say that it stops now, that I stop now to choose to be this, to believe this, and to do this. What I love most about the story of Saul, what a lot of people forget and disregard, is that while Saul was living his life, while Saul was on his way to kill people who believed in Jesus, what did God do? God chose Saul. I've been talking about your choices. God chose Saul. God chose a man like Saul. Of all people. God chose Saul to be what people would listen to. So if God could choose Saul, God would choose Saul. What does that mean when he chooses you or me? What do you think that means he sees when he sees us and he says, I choose you. You're worth going for. You're worth loving. You're worth coming to this earth for. And that's my first of 3 points tonight. First, that you are chosen, and that means that you matter. You are chosen, you matter. The beauty of this is your belief does not equate to the power of this. You don't have to believe this to be true. Someone once said that someone came up to this old guy and was like, you know what? My life's hard, forget it. If God was real, I wouldn't have all these struggles. God's just not real. And the guy's like, okay, I just want to let you know I believe the same thing about gravity. So I'm going to go jump off the roof. You can believe what you want, but it will not keep God from loving you, but it won't keep God from choosing you. He has chosen you. You matter more than you can ever imagine. So God created you in his image, and he chose you. And that also means on my second point, your choices matter. Your choices genuinely matter from day to day. As I mentioned, sometimes we can be quicker to blame God than we are to look in the mirror. Because the truth of the matter is this. Do you know the next slide? You are not stuck in the situations that you can't control. You are stuck in the situations that you're unwilling to change. You're not stuck in the situations that you can't control. The family I'm born into. The people I'm surrounded by. I can't do this, I can't do that. You're not stuck in those situations. You're stuck in the situations that you're unwilling to change and you have the ability to do so. Like what you do with your free time, how early you wake up, what you're actually reading on your newsfeed, what you're actually searching for on the internet. You have so much ability with the choices that you have options to make. You're not stuck in what you can't control. You're stuck in what you're unwilling to change. Again, social systems, relationships, friendships. You may have heard the saying that you don't just make choices, but your choices make you. Just want to reiterate that. My last point, again, I'm going to go through these. My last point is more of a challenge. I want each of you to think of something that you can choose to change. I want you to choose something to change. Because, yes, we're in church. Yes, God loves you. And I'm so excited to tell you, you are not perfect just the way you are. Sounds pretty, right? We want to stay near that because it's comfortable. God loves you the way he finds you, but he's also going to push you to who he's called you to be. You are not perfect as you are. You are perfect as he created and intended you to be, and that is a lack of change, of adaptability, of growth, and maturity. What I love about the story of Jesus is that there's a verse talking about when he was your age, and guess what it said? It said he grew in stature and in wisdom. Jesus grew. Jesus did not come out as a bearded man because that'd be crazy and weird as heck. Jesus was genuinely a toddler. I'm not going to get weird and say Jesus was in puberty, but Jesus literally, he changed. He grew up. Jesus was probably super socially awkward. Like, navigating certain conversational things, Jesus grew. He changed. You guys, again, if there's something that you're frustrated with, if there's something you find yourself like consistently complaining about, stop justifying your reason to complain and start asking yourself what you're unwilling to change and why that has stayed the same. You address that and your complaints change because your problems will not be the same. So when I say choose something to change, I want to ask the question, what could God be calling you to stop doing in your life that you're doing right now? Practically think about that. What could God be calling you to stop doing in your life right now? Maybe it's gossiping. Maybe it's certain habits. Maybe it's the amount of free time that you waste scrolling around with time right there with you. Maybe it's addiction. Maybe it's hanging out with the wrong crowd, what you watch or listen to in your free time. Maybe it's making lame excuses for not coming to HSM. Like, genuinely, what do you need to stop doing right now in your life? On the opposite hand, what could God be calling you to start doing? What could God be calling you to start doing? Maybe it's coming more regularly. Maybe it's having serious conversations with your friends. You can shoot the breeze, you can be surface level all day. You'll stay just as empty wondering if there's anything worth looking for out there. What could you start doing right now? Maybe it's coming more regularly. Maybe it's getting excited from CLI to go to escape. Maybe it's deciding to get baptized. Maybe you can stop making excuses and start being more intentional about every time. The truth is that you were chosen by God. You were loved by God. You were entirely His to be an extension of Him by the choices that you make and the life that you live. And that is a purposeful life to live. And the thing is, age doesn't matter. You have the ability to choose, therefore we have the ability to live it out.